In this next section, we're going to talk about the gastrointestinal tract and talking about digestion and absorption and the metabolism of nutrients. I'd like you to understand these definitions. Digestion is the breakdown of food. And so think about like picking up a cracker or piece of bread and just crumbling it in your hand. We're breaking down the food. In our bodies, we are using motion, kind of like that motion of breaking. If you can visualize breaking down that piece of bread in your hands, because the muscle tissues in our body actually do break down some of the food that way, but more so we are using digestive enzymes as well as good bacteria to help break down the food as well. Absorption is actually sending the nutrients to the cells. So when we absorb nutrients into our GI or our gut lining, we're utilizing lymph system as well as blood vessels, and that can send our nutrients to the cells to be used. Metabolism is using all of this to sustain life. So that's the difference between these three definitions. So next we're going to talk about the basics of the digestive system and sort of what happens. This is not a physiology class, so we're not going to get into too many details, but I just want you to understand some basics. Obviously, it's starting in the mouth. You're putting the food in your mouth, you're chewing the food, which is breaking down the food. That's the physical motion of breaking down the food, but we're also using digestive enzymes in the mouth, specifically to break down carbohydrates, like the digestive enzyme amylase. And actually, when you see, say, a pie that's high in carbohydrates, that's a good example, a pie or some cookies or a piece of cake, already your mouth starts salivating, and that is water, but also it's digestive enzymes ready for you to consume that food and start breaking it down as soon as it hits your mouth. Next, we have the esophagus. In transporting the food down the esophagus, we use a process called peristalsis. And if you think about squeezing out toothpaste from a tube of toothpaste, it's a squeezing action in the esophagus, and it actually squeezes at the top and the bottom of the food so that you could stand on your head and still swallow food and it would get to your stomach, even though by the use of gravity, the gravity is not affecting the food getting to your stomach. In the stomach, we release a lot of acid. Your stomach is supposed to be very acidic. When we take antacids, that decreases the acid content in our stomach. And every now and then, that can be very helpful. A doctor might suggest or prescribe you to take an antacid because you get heartburn. It's not anything to do with our heart, but it's actually the acid in our stomach creates a pain that is near the area of our body where our heart is, and so people call it heartburn. When we take antacids all the time, especially without a doctor recommending it, that can affect the acidity in our stomach. And the acid in your stomach actually helps with so many things. It helps break down the food. So if you think about marinating a piece of chicken in like some sort of a lemon juice marinade, if you leave it for too long, maybe you forget about it in the refrigerator, and it's been in there for 5 days instead of 1 day, the meat actually breaks down and becomes mealy because the acid will break down the food. Well, your stomach is super acidic. It's breaking down the food. It also kills bad bacteria, so it's helpful for your immune system. And by breaking down the food properly, that helps later on with absorption. So all of these things play a big part in using the nutrients that we're consuming. The majority of our nutrients are actually absorbed in the small intestine. So next after the stomach is the small intestine, and that's that one in the center there. It's a very long tube, but there are these villi that are lining the tissue of the small intestine, and they drastically increase the surface area of our intestines. Our intestines are amazing for absorbing nutrients and very efficient at it, especially when we keep them healthy. Next is the large intestine, also could be called the colon. That is where we are receiving waste product. Digestion is breaking down the last bits of things. A lot of your good bacteria that is in this part can help break down the remaining food particles. Water is absorbed in this area, and that's how you get feces, preferably not a lot of water in fecal tissue or fecal matter, because the tissues in our large intestine hopefully absorbed a majority of that water. If you have a lot of water in your large intestine and you're not absorbing it properly, that is what we call diarrhea. And if you are absorbing so much water, maybe because you're not consuming enough water, or maybe because you're not consuming enough fiber in your diet, then that can actually cause constipation, and then the waste is not leaving our body in a timely manner. So a few more specifics about the digestive system. When we see or smell food, our brain automatically starts stimulating the gastric system or the digestive system to start getting ready to secrete digestive enzymes which are chemical compounds that can break down the food for us. The digestive system starts in the mouth by the chewing motion and that digestive amylase. So some of this I already talked about. But these slides are available for you to actually take notes if you want, or just use these to study when you take the quiz. So some of these bullet points are what I just talked about. A few more details about the stomach. Pepsin is something that begins breaking down. That's an enzyme in the stomach, begins breaking down protein. So that's a specific thing that breaks down proteins in our stomach. One more reason why we do need the acid and we need our stomach tissue to be healthy, so that we're properly breaking down proteins so that we can later on absorb them very well in our small intestine. A balanced meal that has high fiber, protein, healthy fats, that is going to leave the stomach a little more slowly. Fats have the highest amount of calories per gram. They also help slow the digestive process a little bit in the stomach. So when the food leaves the stomach quickly, like a high carb meal or like a sugary beverage, then we're more likely to just quickly absorb those nutrients instead of slowly absorbing nutrients with a balanced meal and then staying full for longer throughout the day. So remember that the contents of your meal affects how quickly you'll be hungry again. So let's just look at some examples. So Pop-Tarts, for example, is a high sugary, high carbohydrate food item. Very little nutrients in Pop-Tarts. They actually now they have added vitamins and minerals to them, but really there's no natural nutrients left in them because they're so highly processed. So high carbohydrates, very little healthy fats, hardly to no fiber. That means this is a quick absorption food, which means you're going to be hungry again in a short amount of time. But that doesn't mean you consumed less calories. So this, which looks like kind of like a breakfast cookie, has some dried fruit in there, maybe some nuts, maybe some oats. That's going to be a higher fiber, healthy fats type of breakfast example, and that's going to take longer to leave your stomach. That's going to be a slow digestion food, which means you're not going to be hungry as quickly later. Same thing with this breakfast. We have some avocado, which has healthy fats as well as fiber, some fiber in the tomatoes alongside, and then the egg and toast. All of those things have high nutrient content. They have healthy fats, they have proteins, they have fiber. So that is something that's going to keep you full longer. It's slow absorption and a slower digestive process for those foods. So you will not be hungry as quickly after you consume this food. Fruity Pebbles, this type of cereal, high sugar content, Some fat, maybe in depending on what type of milk you choose to eat with it, but the cereal itself has really no fat in it, very little nutrients. This is a high sugar item, which is going to be quick absorption, which means you're not going to stay full as long. This would be the opposite. So a granola type cereal, it looks like maybe with like a Greek yogurt with it and some fresh fruit. This is going to be high fiber, healthy fats, proteins. You are going to stay full longer. This is a slow absorption food item, and you're not going to be hungry as quickly. A sugary beverage, quick absorption, which means we also quickly store those nutrients instead of using them for energy. And when we store nutrients quickly, we store them as fat. So this is a quick absorption item, and you will be hungry relatively quickly after. And this is just another example, like I showed you in the other breakfast with the eggs and toast. In the small intestine, I kind of talked about this already, but the villi is something I want you to remember that definition. Think of like finger-like projections that are lining the tissue of your small intestine, and they increase the surface area of your small intestine to help you absorb nutrients more efficiently. And then in the large intestine, this is where we have a lot of good bacteria that are very beneficial. They're helping break down remaining nutrients, but we also help in the large intestine. We also move, fluctuate water back and forth, and this is how we can have healthy bowel movements, as well as the good bacteria helps keep our large intestine healthy and helps prevent disease. So for calories, think of calories as energy. Many people think of calories as something that's bad because, oh, calories, that means I'm going to gain weight. Not necessarily. If we're eating nutrient dense calories, so lots of nutrients, lots of vitamins and minerals in our calories, then we're more likely to be using them for energy, which affects the energy out as well. So energy in healthy forms, energy out means I now have more energy to walk to class, more energy to maybe walk my dog or hang out with friends or play volleyball on the beach or something. So having energy is directly related to the foods that we're consuming. Also, the foods we consume and what we do in our daily life affects our metabolism. So you may have heard the word metabolism before. Basal metabolism, or BMR, which is basal metabolic rate, the rate at which our metabolism is running in our body, that is the minimum energy we need for the day. And that minimum is, for many adults, a minimum of maybe 1,200 calories a day. So some of those really restrictive fad diets that you might see out there often are too few in calories for what we need just for our basic body functions, for our basal metabolism. Physical activity affects our basal metabolism, but the majority of the calories that we use for the day is our basal metabolism. And then digestion and absorption is about 10% of our energy needs. So the majority of our energy needs we need for the day is that basal metabolism, but that's just the minimum we need just for body functions. If we want to, say, go play volleyball on the beach with friends, we're going to need to consume a little bit more than maybe that example of the 1,200 calories in a day. We're going to need a little bit more in order to have energy to do extra things other than just sitting around or sleeping. There are many things that can alter or affect our basal metabolism. Your gender, males tend to have a higher basal metabolism or higher calorie need than women. Your height, So how big of a person are you? You're going to have a higher basal metabolism because there's more tissue that needs more calories than someone that is shorter or smaller. If you exercise regularly, or if you're sick, if you have a fever, or if you're under a lot of stress, you actually may need more calories because your body is burning more calories due to the stress on the body. So one thing that is an activity that's interesting to do is to calculate your own basal metabolic needs. And this is one calculation you can use. So multiply your weight in pounds by this number, if you're a male or if you're a female. And then, so there's an example here down at the bottom. So 150-pound female multiplied by 9.8, that factor, and then that's about how many calories she would need for the day just lying around. That doesn't mean there's extra physical activity going on. So if you were wanting to factor in extra activities, then you would multiply, I'm going to go back a second, you would multiply 1,470 calories by an additional factor. And we would choose that based on what kind of physical activities. Are they moderate energy activities, like just taking a brisk walk, or are they more vigorous physical activities like running or jogging or going on a long bike ride? So these are the factors you could multiply that number by. So say if I'm more of a jogger or runner and I like to run a few miles in a day, then I would multiply mine by 1.9. All right, next we're going to talk about sustainability in the next video.